All right. Hey, what's going on, folks? Hey, welcome to Beyond Our World. We're here tonight with John Edwards and Jake Roberts, and we are going to be talking about Can't Touch This. How you guys doing tonight?
Great,
Doing well.
great.
That was fun.
I had to do it. I just couldn't help myself.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's too funny.
So I got talking. You guys know out there, you guys know that I like to come up with some odd things to talk about. Alien disco. That's awesome, Barbara. Yeah. I like to talk about some weird things that pop into my brain, and let's have it on a topic. Last time we were on 2 Sundays ago with Jake and Gretchen and John and me and Alessandra and Tim, her husband Tim. We talked about out-of-body experience. And if you haven't seen that show, you really should check it out. That was really a very interesting one. Tonight, I wanted to come around and talk about, Can't Touch This. And what this means is, what I wanted to go with on this is that if something exists, well, let's just say, if something exists, but we can't touch it, see it, hear it, smell it, or perceive it, is it truly there? Because our senses are so limited, our human senses are so limited, is our brain kind of making, blocking some of it out. And therefore, we can't see something that may actually exist right there in the same room with us or right next to us or in the same space. And now quantum physics says two things can't occupy the same space at the same time. But let's talk about that a little bit. So what do you think? So this could get pretty deep.
Well, Jeff, think about what you just said. Two things can't occupy the same space in the same time.
Right.
Can they occupy the same space in different times?
Yes.
I mean, and that's, we're talking parallel universes or things that you might not be able to see or even different periods in time. So, do we sometimes see echoes of the past? Kind of being with me, my question right off. I mean, I've been to Gettysburg. I've been to the battlefields. I've seen things on the battlefields. We've presented before, what we think are spirits on the battlefields. And what are we seeing? We're seeing an echo in time.
Right.
And does that exist beyond my senses? Yeah, because I can only imagine if what is manifesting is what I see. What is it that I'm not seeing?
Right.
And are there things that we can't see?
Right.
Well, if we just consider regular science anyway, I mean, one thing that we don't even stop to think about is that we are touching air, and we have 15 pounds of pressure against us at all times at sea level, and we don't notice it. And Jeff, I think you brought up a really good point of the idea of how much does our brain filter out, right? With even on the subconscious level. Our senses would be so incredibly overwhelmed that we would just kind of go into vapor lock, I think, if we actually perceived everything that was going on around us with our senses.
Yep.
And so even with our limited senses, within the small spectrum of our range of sight, in terms of the light spectrum, our hearing, feeling, you can't touch this. Even within that range, I think if we absorbed every sensation, that we would be completely overwhelmed.
Yep.
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah, and that's a very good point, and that's something that and I seen Barbara brought up. Something Barbara Duncan brought up, that physics. Quantum physics says that you can't really touch anything, and that's a hard one to wrap your brain around. And what I was going to say, and we'll kind of delve into this a little bit deeper, but that we're limited on what we can see.
Yeah.
We're also limited on what we can hear compared to other animals in the true spectrum of frequencies. Is it also possible that we're limited in what we can touch? Now, when you take the fact that I can pick up this can right here and I can feel it, it feels a little cold, and it feels smooth surface. But am I actually touching this? Now, quantum physics says you can't actually touch that because there's molecules between my fingers and the can. So therefore, I'm not physically touching the can. I'm touching the molecules, and the molecules are touching the can, I guess. So that gets pretty crazy, doesn't it?
It does. I'm reminded of the book, The Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot, where, he, talks about a theory where the entire universe is a hologram and we're a part of it. We are a reflection of it. It's a reflection of us.
Mhm.
And it's a really complex relationship where you have the entirety, the whole is actually contained within just one piece of it, you know? And so that's kind of what your description there just reminded me of. It's a really fascinating theory.
Yeah, it truly is. And that's something that, as we go along, we're going to dig into this a little bit as much as we go. And again, I am not a a quantum physicist, and I'm not even a scientist, but I got a curious brain, and sitting around and thinking about some of this stuff, and then I look into it, and I do a little bit of research, and that just intrigues me yet confuses me more as we go along because there's so much information out there. Is it all true? A lot of it is speculation because honestly,
Mhm.
we just
Mhm.
don't truly understand the human brain. And until we can, and I think that's achievable someday, but we just don't truly understand the human brain and what makes it work and how does it go about doing what it does. We come up
Sure.
with guesses and we come up with analysis and we come up with diagrams and all of that, and watch the brain synapses firing and all that kind of stuff. But yet, I think, they say, oh, well, we're only using about 5 or 10% of our brain as it is. I think that
Right.
may be true. But I think our brain, like you mentioned earlier, Jake, I think our brain is kind of filtering some of that out
Sure.
because, you probably couldn't handle it all. It might blow you up. I
Yeah.
did want to say before we get too deep in it, I just want to say hi to a few people that are logging in here. Sandollar Ray was like one of the first ones that popped in before, right after 6 o'clock. I didn't even have to,
Wow.
we weren't up there, but he jumped in. So I wanted to say hi to Ray. Thank you for coming, Ray. And let's see, Paula Steen is here. Hi, Paula. Jeff's in the house. Jeff's all over the place, man. He's like on every show. I mean, he's on your show, Dick. He's on,
Yeah. Yeah.
all of our shows. He's over there at Could It Be Oak Island podcast and everything. So yeah, actually, a lot of our folks that watch our watchers are. Kate's here, and Mary's here. Hi, Mary. Jan actually. Why do I keep thinking of Hammer Time? Did you miss me playing it? I can play it again. D Jones, Joe is here. Hi, Joe. How you doing? Ray D. Paula Mason's here. Hi, Paula. Barbara, of course. Alien Disco. Yeah, so we got a lot of folks. Catherine's over on our Facebook side, and then of course Jan and Linda and everybody's out there working hard. And Wanda, hi Wanda, Tom Burns, April. Thank you guys for coming by tonight. Really do appreciate it. And we are going to take some calls later on too as we go along because this is one of those, we could go down some rabbit holes here tonight for sure. Just because it's so vast. This subject gets so vast. So it's okay. And if we get down and take some phone calls, maybe you can kind of share with us if we have any quantum physicists in the audience tonight. Call in. I mean, tell us. I did try to invite one, but he never did answer me, so he probably thought I was a crackpot. And he, but anyway, so we will go along. One of the things I wanted to do, there were some questions right off the top, and I wanted to ask one of these questions. If here's question number one: if you cannot see, hear, or feel something, how can you prove that it does exist? Now, take for instance wind. Okay. Now you just mentioned air a little while ago and the pressures that are on our bodies. Okay, wind is something you can't see it. You can see its effects on things, blowing trees around or whatever, blowing leaves across the yard. You can't see it. You can't hear it, but you can hear its effect on a tree as it's blowing through the branches. But you can feel it, or can you? You can feel the wind on your body. So is that giving you at least one of the senses to say that air does? I mean, you're breathing it, but wind, I mean wind and movement of air. Does that feel? Does that qualify, or is it just because it's evaporating the moisture on your skin that you feel it? I mean, how does that play in? Do you think?
I think that because it can be measured.
Ah,
Okay. When we're talking about wind, we're talking about air pressure. Those things are measurable. And so, you don't have to directly be able to see them in order to measure them. And that's, I think that that's the nature of technology, the definition of technology is the application of science to solve a problem.
Right.
And, so that's where that comes in. It's my opinion.
Yep. And that's the beauty of science, is that because in many ways it has given us the capability to understand some of these things, or to actually be able to measure or distinguish these things as being real. So there's a very good point. So if in that one, that's a very good spot on that. Do things exist when you can't see them? I think they do. I mean, just like wind, it exists. We can't see it, but I mean, we know it's there, and as you mentioned, we can measure it. So in that case, yes, that's true. But what about any kind of thing? I mean, and again, that question could get really, really deep there. But thinking about religion, okay, everybody knows I made it very clear. I'm a Christian. I believe in God, a supreme being. I believe in God. Do I have any proof that God exists? Not really. I'm going on faith that he exists, or that God exists. I can't feel him. I can't hear him. I can't see him. I can't touch him, but yet I believe. So does that make, because I can't perceive him with any of my senses, does that say that God does not exist?
Well, Jeff, I think Joseph Campbell said it so well. If you could prove God, what would the value of faith be?
Right.
And so in that case, there are some mysteries that might be beyond our capacity to understand, but that's why they call them mysteries. Especially the mystery of the triune. In the Christian tradition, they're beyond what we know, but that makes sense because if it's divine, of divine origin, perhaps we can only see the effect, but not the cause, because you're going back to cause-effect relationships, which is a Buddhist thing as well.
Sure.
Right.
What I was reminded of was, Carl Sagan, and he wrote Contact. And, here you have, one of the most scientific thinkers of our time. And in that story, he incorporated the idea of, a minister falling in love with a scientist. And if you watch the movie, it's played by Jodie Foster. And
Love that movie.
it's a great movie. But there's this really wonderful scene where, she says, you can't prove that God exists. And, the Matthew McConaughey character looks at her and he says, well, did you love your father? And of course that, kind of like hits her right where, it hurts. And she says, well, yes, of course I did. He says, prove it. So obviously the lesson there is that, even though it's not, something that is scientifically, objectively provable, it doesn't make it not so. And I just really kind of love that, that analogy that he used in that story. So it kind of goes along with what you were talking about there, Jeff, I think, especially when it comes to our faith.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that does, it tells us that, and again, it's one of those gray areas, but I mean, for me, it's not, because my faith says God exists. I believe in Jesus and I believe in God. So, but can I prove them? I can tell you what effect being a Christian has had on my life, but does that prove to you that God exists? No, it doesn't. So it's just kind of gets into one of those little areas, and we can kind of touch on that a little bit as we go. But I mean, this isn't here to be a religious show by any means, but it's one of those things. It's one of those little areas where this kind of plays in.
It really gets into more of a epistemological question. Epistemology is the study of how we know what we know in philosophy, and when you think about it, God's a concept, an idea, but the actual essence versus existence of God is beyond our understanding. It is the crux of what makes everything happen. And if that's the case, what is it that we are seeing? And when you have an experience of God, which is beyond you, you're kind of wrapped up in this experience, like a sunset or something that you're struck by awe and wonder, and you freeze because you can't believe what you're seeing. And suddenly the mind is stunned. And this is the kind of religious experience of awe and wonder. You're stunned.
Yeah.
And it's an awful experience because it's full of awe and wonder. Right. At that point, what is the moment when the mind stops and you're raptured in that moment that is beyond your senses, and you're your whole mind's kind of blown away by what you're experiencing and sensing. And then when you de-escalate from that kind of religious experience, or the sense of awe and wonder, you start to try to categorize in your scientific mind what you just saw and put the different pieces of what you saw into its little categories. Like, okay, this is the observation of the touch and feel and see, and you start to dissect the religious experience instead of just seeing it as a religious experience, which ultimately transcended who you are. As a person, you kind of just in this rapture. And what is that? What is that experience that you're experiencing that is beyond your senses, where you're stunned and suddenly you stop and you're like, I can't believe what I'm seeing.
Right.
Well, you can't believe it because it's beyond what the cognitive mind, the rational mind knows.
Right.
Right.
We're going to dig a little deeper into
Yeah.
the whole thing about the mind as we go along here.
Yeah.
For sure,
But-
because that's definitely a good point to this whole thing. But I did want to point out something that Jan said here. And Jan said, let's see, let me pop this up here, and said, but what about when you're just sitting alone and you smell flowers or aftershave or something familiar, but nothing is visible? And I've had that happen. Now,
I've had that happen.
I relate that to a paranormal experience where I'm actually walk into a room or just sitting in a room and watching TV. And all of a sudden, you get this whiff of a smell
Mm-hmm.
that wasn't there a moment ago and is not there now, but all of a sudden you smelled whatever it was. That smell crossed your, and you don't have windows open or whatever, you're just sitting there watching TV. Where did that smell come from? Why did you all of a sudden smell that particular odor? And did it, and again, we could go very, very deep into a whole conversation about that. But, again, is that you were saying that something is there in the
Mhm.
room with you, but you just can't see it, and walked by you for a moment. It might have been again, we could get pretty crazy with what we talk about here, but that's kind of a paranormal experience to me also, but an alternate reality there for just a moment, or alternate dimension there for just a moment. They crossed paths and you picked up something from that other dimension or that other reality or whatever you want to call it. You smelled it just for a moment, then it was gone that quick. And I think sometimes in our paranormal investigations, if you like to watch those kind of shows and see that, I think sometimes they're calling something a ghost when in fact it may have been a crossover. I don't know. What do you think about that?
It's really interesting. Out of all of our senses, the sense of smell is the one that will immediately bring back a memory or a
Yes.
feeling or an association. So it's one of our most powerful senses in that sense. Forgive the pun, but
Makes sense.
yeah. My sisters are paranormal investigators, and I don't know if you remember, I had them on my show for a Halloween special. And they talk about, these kinds of experiences frequently. And, it's not just, maybe it's string theory states that, there are up to 10 dimensions simultaneously, and like you said, Jeff, maybe it's this idea of, there's a brief overlap between a couple of those dimensions where, the word that you used, I believe, was crossed over. Yeah. Interesting thought.
Yeah. I mean, they talk about, and again, it's a whole nother realm of that, but you're talking about the string theory and the vibrations. Everything exists on this vibrating existence. And I'm not a physicist, or I'm not a PhD into this type of thing, but that string theory is very interesting. Talking about that and how things exist on a different, I guess it would be the if you take a string and you a guitar string, you take a D string or a high string and you pluck it and it's vibrating at a certain rate, and then you take a bigger string and you pluck it and it's vibrating slower, and there you get the different sound. If you take life or some sort of existence and you do those in different areas, would they be able to see one another or be able to react with one another? I don't know. And it gets pretty deep in that, but And somebody, and we had a couple people that jumped in on that that very thing. Here's
Mhm.
one from Linda talking about we can't even say that our memories exist in our brain, or maybe they exist somewhere else. That's an
Wow.
interesting point, or
Yeah.
statement or question, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, um, and if we take that, so what I wanted to do is I wanted to show, and most people we've seen this, we kind of learned some of this stuff in school. But I did want to talk about this for just a moment. I'll bring up these pictures that I have. Um, this one is when I was talking about what we can see and what we can hear. This is the visible light spectrum, and you see how much it goes from cosmic rays. How big that bandwidth is there of visible light. Um, and the wavelengths of light and the short and the long, of course. And then you see the area
Mhm.
right there in the middle about how much the human eye can actually, our humans can actually see of that, a very,
Yeah.
very small portion. We can't see the infrared, we can't see the ultraviolet, gamma rays, and all of that.
Mhm.
Okay. So the same thing holds when we talk about hearing. When we take the spectrum of sound, oh, here's another one on light. Here's just a different way to look at it here. At this
Oh,
one
yeah.
here. So it's the same kind of thing.
Mhm.
Our weight, what we can see is so limited. So, and the same thing happens for sound. So what could be happening around us? Here's just a brief look at like different animals. Now, how they figure this stuff out, I'm not really sure. Who takes the time to figure out that a horse can hear between 55 hertz and 33.5 kilohertz? How'd they figure that out? I don't know. It's a lot of work. Um, but you see where humans are in here, and the human runs between 31 hertz and 19 kilohertz. Okay. So there are other animals that can see or hear, I'm sorry, much greater range than we can or different range. So knowing again that we are limited as human beings, that's why I'm saying that if we can't see it, does it mean it doesn't exist? If we can't touch it. Now, when I get back to the quantum physics talking about me touching this can, I don't think anybody's actually looked into a study about that, but it makes me wonder, are we limited in what we can touch as well as what we can see and what we can hear?
But Jeff, that begs the question: are we limited? What are we limited in not seeing or not hearing? Or is the suggestion here in this conversation that there are things that exist that are there that we just can't or don't have access to because of our limited senses? So there's two suggestions: what are our limited senses, confining us
Mhm.
by? And the second question is: are there things to be sensed? And if there
Yeah.
are,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's a whole other realm of
Mhm.
what is it to be sensed. Is it just a phenomena? Are there creatures? Are there other things that we're not seeing? I mean, so can you clarify that a bit, Jeff? I mean, what do you suggest? What's the suggestion?
Well, I don't know. I think personally, my own personal belief, and again, I have no proof to back this up. I believe there are things that exist outside of our ability to see and hear. Can I prove that? No.
When you say
But I mean,
things, are you
I
saying entities, energies for sure?
energies for sure. Yeah, for sure. Um, and again, going back to that alternate dimension or that string theory, if there is things that can't occupy the same two objects cannot occupy the same space at the same time, but in
Correct.
different if time is changed a little bit or if time is different. eh, I'm trying to think of the best way to explain this. But yeah, I do believe that they do. I do think that things exist that we just simply can't see it and we can't hear it, we can't touch it. I can't prove that, but I honestly feel that. I've done a lot of investigations to where I've heard and seen things that I just simply can't explain.
Well, or are time and space intertwined? So a space and a space needs time to exist, and
Mhm,
therefore two things can occupy what we perceive as the same space, but because of the time element, they're two different spaces
mhm.
within time.
Right.
Mhm.
Because it seems those two concepts are intertwined.
Sure.
Jake, am I wrong about that, or what
No,
do you think?
no, I think you're spot on with that analysis. And I don't know. I was thinking of like you said, Jeff. There's no way to really prove that, but throughout history, I mean, going back millennia, people have always talked about being able to um, access or talk to entities or intelligences
Mhm.
that are unseen. Is that real? Is that imagined? Is it the fanciful recordings of someone who wanted to create a mythology?
Mhm.
Well, that's not for me to decide, but I do know that history is replete with examples of that being reported. If we are to take them at face value, then as John indicated, that answers the question of, is there something that is unseen that we're not detecting through our limited senses? And a couple weeks ago, when we were talking about the Ubi experience, it comes back once again. I quoted an ancient Greek philosopher by the name of Parmenides, and he was one of the very first ones to talk about the very phenomenon that we're discussing here today, which is he was talking about the mind perceives an awareness of eternals. In other words, the idea that something, for example, the perfect chair. If we have this image of what a perfect chair might be in our heads,
Mhm.
and our mind perceives an awareness of eternals through the imperfect senses, themselves fragmented and temporal. You just described through those images of how our sight and hearing is limited and
Mhm.
fragmented, and it's temporal because it's encased in time space, and so that limits us in terms of what we're able to perceive. And so he was talking about that, in ancient Greece. And John, you and I were talking earlier today, and
Mhm.
yesterday we talked about Plato's allegory of the cave with
Yeah.
Plato's theory of forms. This
Hmm.
idea that we are looking at the world around us and recognizing these forms in their ideal state from our experience of them before we were born,
Hmm.
and identifying them in the world around us. And so um, the question does imply exactly what John had said, which is this idea of, okay, so if we can't experience or we can't detect using our senses, uh, something else that is out there, it implies that there is something else to be detected. So,
Mhm.
um, yeah, I don't know. That's my take.
Yep. Yeah, that's it really does. And one other thing I wanted to point out too that I kind of learned as I was looking into this, I was always worried, about sight, touch, smell, taste, and hearing. But then there was and I was mispronouncing it, vestibular. Did I do that right?
Yeah, yeah,
Vestibular.
vestibular.
Um, yeah, vestibular, which is also, they say it's actually two senses. It's your movement and balance sense, which gives us the information about where our head and body are in space. So it gives you that balance and sense of, So there's another sense that, and then you talk about, we talked about our out of body experiences. When I had my out of body experience, I knew up from down. I mean, I knew my orientation the whole time. Even when I joined the clouds and was cruising with them, I knew where I was in my orientation. So, did I have that even when I was out of body doing that
Mm,
experience? I still had my sight. I still had I don't know about smell. I didn't remember smelling anything, but I still had all the other senses working. So, yeah,
mhm.
interesting. But there was another one that I did not realize that actually existed. But I like really what you said too, Jake, about your brain. And your brain would be overwhelmed. And I think this was a particular scientist, a cognitive scientist by the name of Donald Hoffman, and he made a comment about our brains in relation to what you just said.
Mhm.
And he was talking about it as if it were talking about the overwhelming of our senses, that our brains kind of tune out a lot of what we sense in all those senses, and it limits it because it would blow our minds. It gives us enough to survive and function, and that's a I want to and somebody said something. I saw the thing go by, and I didn't catch the whole statement about 10% using 10% of our brain.
Mhm.
It's actually probably a little bit more than that. But he put it this way. He said, think of it like a computer. When you have your monitor in front of you, your monitor is your interface with the computer. So your desktop screen with its icons. Now you go to your icons, you see that red box, little block icon with a white arrow in it. And you know that's YouTube, right? So is that what's in your computer that you're clicking on it? That's your interface. You're going to click on that to access something else, but that's your interface. You're not seeing all the stuff that goes behind that to make that icon appear there. Not
Right.
seeing all the transistors and the capacitors and the things that are in your computer or the data flowing through there. That's your interface. And he was saying that that is what our brains are doing. It's filtering out all those transistors and all those capacitors and all that data and giving us that icon to work with because the other stuff is too much for us to handle. Does that make sense? I was trying to see if I could explain the way he did that.
It makes perfect sense, especially when you consider the idea of, and this is John's wheelhouse, when it comes to symbolism and how our brains work in terms of how they categorize information. It has to do with linguistics, and how we are able to formulate our understanding of reality. And so, yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I just saw Barbara had put up on the screen about the William Blake quote, and it reminded me of Aldous Huxley's book, The Doors of Perception,
Yes.
where he was. I mean, he was a scientist and originally was going to be a doctor, but his poor eyesight didn't allow him to do that. But one of the things that he and other scientists at that time were actually doing were experimenting with hallucinogenic drugs, psilocybin, DMT, and then of course later LSD. And what he recorded in that book, it's a nonfiction book, was the ability to suddenly be able to perceive. It opens up what he referred to in reference to William Blake, the doors of perception, where he was able to actually, he believed, identify, well, another dimension in a sense.
Mhm.
But then again, once again, it's the old hullabaloo of,
Mhm.
or I guess we call it a bugaboo of, is it a hallucination just as a product of the drug, or is it truly a perception?
Right.
And again, it's one of those things that is very difficult to prove scientifically, I think.
Yeah.
Well, it would be a perception either way. One be a false perception of reality, perhaps, or
Perhaps.
maybe a true perception. But it is a
Right.
perception either way. You still are perceiving, whether
Mhm.
it be hallucinogen or not, or hallucination or
Right,
not.
right.
There's still a perception happening.
Yeah.
So that capacity of the human brain is still functioning. Is what is it that, again, I call on the question: what is it that we perceive?
Mhm.
Yep.
What is the in an epistemological sense? What is it that the knower and the relationship with the known? What is it that is known? Is there anything really known, or does it all go through perception?
Mhm.
And then again, the doors of perception.
Yeah.
Right.
What is it? What is it?
And of course, I have to throw in some bacon here. But Sir Francis Bacon, with his inductive reasoning, his scientific method, that's exactly what he was seeking to do, was to kind of marry this idea of science and religion, something that in today's society, in our secular society, people say just simply can't be done. And yet, what he was trying to do was take what we know, inductive reasoning, and apply it to what we don't know. Take what we can see and perceive and apply it to what we can't.
Mhm.
And in that way, figure out what else is there, right?
Mhm.
And so he believed that by studying creation, you could come to hopefully understand the creator. And
Mhm.
that I think that's kind of what you're talking about. There's this idea of one of the things, and we kind of got into this, I think last time, was this idea of this sort of subjectivism versus reality, or relativism, if you will. The idea of not being able to say definitively, something that is true. And
Mhm.
the problem I have with that is that Eric Blair, under the name of George Orwell, stated succinctly that true freedom is the ability to say that 2 and 2 make 4. Given that, all else will follow. In other words, saying something that is true. Freedom is the ability to say the truth, and that is, a provable reality that 2 and 2 make 4. And so, one of the arguments that people use in reference to this idea of people constructing their reality by perception is they use quantum physics as the argument for that. However, I disagree with that idea that we are creating our reality by perceiving it. I think that it works on a quantum level, but I disagree that that's something that we can do on the macro level, because I think the rule of the universe, it's been stated over and over again, as above, so below, on earth as it is in heaven, right? The idea of we are expressions of that macro on the microcosm level as humans. And I don't think that it works the other way around. And I think the belief that it could is a form of hubris, in my opinion. So this idea of what is knowable, I think that we have our senses specifically to make sure that we can grasp that which is knowable here in a physical temporal reality, and then apply that to that which we cannot perceive.
And so the question I always ask is, without our senses, is that which is knowable does it still have an existence outside of our senses? Is there an existence of reality outside our senses that is knowable, but perhaps we don't know it?
I think so, but again, that's something we can't really prove.
It is something we can't really prove. But think about this. Think about the advances in science. We didn't know the atom existed at one point, but the atom existed. And so there was much speculation about what the atom may have looked like early on in the scientific community, and eventually, someone discovered the atom. And so yes, science is all about hypothetical science. It's all about this idea of trying to prove what we think is real, and then testing the hypothesis, using the Bergsonian method. Is it real or is it not real? Can it be repeatable? Can we have repeatable observations? And really, like Bacon would say, human beings are only looking at and observing the nature of reality, and seeing that within ourselves and our own perceptions, and we're kind of hitting that against, are we seeing what we think we're seeing?
Right.
And there's a whole history of that. There are many things that we never perceived until science discovered it, but we theorized of its existence. And the scientific community, and especially quantum physics, is full of these kind of rabbit holes of like, this is what we think's going on, now can we prove it? And by and large, you usually eventually prove it,
right,
if it's logical.
Usually.
Usually.
Well, we take that, and going back to the whole idea that our brain is filtering out much of this stuff. I mean, if you think that that's not possible, think about your nose. Now, you don't see your nose. Your brain deletes that. It's there. If you look at it, you can see it when you think about it. Yeah. But your brain, when you're talking to people and that, your brain deletes that because it's not necessary. It's there. It's like your chair you're sitting in. You're not thinking about what that chair feels like that you're sitting in right now until you think about, oh, okay, yeah, this chair is pretty comfy or whatever. But you weren't thinking it because you didn't need that information right now. So it does delete things.
Now, I'd be interested to hear what Jake says, what I'm about to say. Well, I'm thinking about it this way. And Jake knows where I feel on this about the whole, my ascendant master theory. Can and Bacon's a perfect example of this, but there were others that were perfect examples of this. Can we train the mind to heighten the senses to see things that we did not think were possible to sense, or hear things that were not possible to sense? Are we capable as human beings and in developing, and I've seen Buddhist monks do this. I've seen, any sort of illumination. The medieval mystics talk about this state of being where you're seeing something almost extra human, extra sensory perception of some type, where
Right.
you've suddenly trained your mind, your brain, to see things that if you're living on a very, survivalist level, you wouldn't see, because it's food, shelter, and warmth and things of that sort.
Right.
Right.
But if
right.
it's almost like seeing these things is almost a luxury or privilege, because everything else on Maslow's hierarchy of needs has to be taken care of for those higher functionings of the brain to be able to be possible. So,
Right.
based upon what you've seen in your study of Bacon and other studies, Jake, would you feel like it goes down to training, or is it possible for our minds to perceive at a higher level and maybe even see things that we weren't capable of seeing the first time around?
Yeah, I would say yes, and with this caveat, the more you focus your attention, and fixate on or meditate or pray
Mhm.
on an idea, and the more you hone your brain in terms of its thinking skills and its ability, I think that what happens is you can become aware of details that would have gone unnoticed before, if that
Mhm.
makes sense. See, the idea of honing the mind and training your brain, it goes back, once again, we're going back millennia here in history, but um, I think that at the end of the day, you're still using the same instruments, right? You're still using the eyes, you're still using the ears, you're still using, the your sense of touch, and so is it that you come to appreciate subtleties more and identify them, that you pick up on through your senses? I wonder if it's really a matter of perceiving more than what you would normally able to do, or if because you have trained your brain to a degree where you notice detail and you pay
Mm.
attention to detail, that suddenly you start to pick up on things you missed before.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not sure, but I agree with that, John. I think so.
Mhm.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's funny. I'll give you a perfect example of that. Ted Williams, when he went to bat, I think I've expressed this before, he would
Yeah.
see the baseball coming at him in slow motion, and he
Right.
was able to slow down reality to be able to hit that home run. And he talks about this, how he was able just to see that baseball in slow motion because he trained his mind to see this. Athletes do this all
Yeah.
the time, where you're
Mhm.
so singularly focused that your mind is trained to see reality differently than the normal person would see reality.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Makes
that's
perfect
when you,
sense.
you think about time and space. When you've had time, I think, I don't know about everybody, but I know I have experienced when time slows down.
Mhm.
And I think I mentioned this when we were talking about the Ubi, out of body experience, that I was mentioned about falling off a ladder. The ladder was tipping and
Yep.
falling, and in slow motion, my brain slowed that all down to a point where I could react so that I didn't fall on top of my son with the ladder. So, talking about that whole time thing, I think we do have that capability of, and if we could train our brain to go ahead and receive some of that, or be able to manipulate maybe even a little bit of our surroundings, like you just said, slowing that pitch down.
Mhm.
How is that possible? That pitch is coming at him at 90 miles an hour or more. How is he possible that he could slow that down so that he could be able to react to the type of pitch it was and hit it?
Well, again, I think it has to do with, I mean, the way we are built. We are made with adrenaline,
Mhm,
okay, and we
mhm.
have the ability to access that. Where it's not so much that the baseball slowed down; it's that his senses sped up to
Right.
such a great degree that
Yes.
he was able to react. And then that's what happened with you with your experience on the ladder. All of a sudden you felt the fear. You were worried about your son and concerned
Mhm.
about his well-being, and that kicks in the adrenaline where suddenly your senses completely speed up to a degree where you're able to react. And I think that we've evolved to be able to do that, and it's one of our great survival techniques, really.
Mhm. Yeah. And I'm gonna go crazy here for a second and just mention an old Star Trek episode. And that was the beauty of
Awesome.
That was the beauty of some of those Gene Roddenberry in his forethought. But there was an episode, the old Star Trek, and I used to watch it when it came out. It was all new next week, the old Captain Kirk. That tells you how old I am. But so they had an episode where there was a race of beings that lived. They were moving faster than normal
Oh,
than human beings were.
I remember that episode. Yeah.
Yeah, and they put something
Yeah,
in Kirk's drink to make him speed up so that now he was in their reality and everybody else was like standing still. They were frozen. So that's that kind of concept there, that there may be other, I'm going to say beings, okay, crazy, I know, but other
yeah.
things that exist, and they're just simply vibrating or moving faster than we are. And our time is a little bit, well, time doesn't change, right? So that's the thing, is time doesn't change. It's just how we perceive it changes, right? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. Yeah, that's a good
Mhm.
way of looking at it, John.
Yep. So interesting. I know that's but
Well,
talking. Go ahead, John.
well, Jeff, I was going to say there are two different ways you could have viewed the incident with the ladder. So, which reality was the real reality?
I don't know.
If you were viewed that reality with a kind of your regular senses, and that's one way to view time, but you had a heightened reality. Understand, your mind kicked it up, and you viewed it in slow motion. So, is reality based upon how a viewer views reality, or is reality is what it is, and therefore both those events were simultaneously happening? Your reality of slow motion, and kind of normal motion. I mean, which one of those was real, or were they both real?
I think they were both real, and I just changed myself. Changed
Exactly.
my ability to see it
Correct.
changed
Yep.
and react to it
Yep.
changed.
So if that's possible, are there things, again, we can't touch us, can't see, are there things that we can do here with our philosopher's stone, our brain, our gray matter, that can change the way we see reality? In your example, the answer would be yes.
Yeah,
Ted
I did it
Williams, yes.
unconsciously.
People do it all the time when they're just about to have a car accident and they see in slow motion, whatever's falling off the truck before them, and and swerve, and sense the instantaneous reaction, and they don't know how they've done it or what they've just done, but it was just in a split moment. So I would say, can you live in, and then the other question for me is, can you live in such a state of heightened awareness all the time? Some people, I think, have that ability just naturally.
Yeah.
And I think some people can train their minds, but what is that heightened state? And if you can slow down time, or at least the perception of time, what else is it that we can't do in our normal state that we would be able to do with the proper training?
We need Tim's brain machine.
Yes, we do. Alessandra, please get Tim. We're going to come up and we're going to tap into Tim's brain. Brain
That's
machine.
awesome.
We're all going to wear his thinking cap for a few hours.
Oh, absolutely.
I want to be able to perceive all this. Yeah. There was another statement that was made, said that most of what we see is an illusion. Our eyes are not all seeing, but we get glimpses of the outside world between rapid movements called saccades, saccades, saccades.
Yeah.
So when you're reading a book, your eyes are moving around across onto the words. Now, some people, and I'm learning how to do this and training myself to do this, trying to being an audiobook narrator, is that you read ahead. So I'm looking at the words ahead and reading what's I'm reading along, but I'm looking at the words ahead. So your eyes are constantly moving. As our eyes move from one thing to another, and you're bringing all this stuff in, it's skipping much of what's around you, but it's grabbing on certain things that will help you put something together. Like if you look at a picture of a landscape with mountains and all this kind of stuff, your eyes are gonna look at the mountain, look at this, look at that, and put it all together as a picture for you. Now, did you see every single detail within that picture in that moment? No, you did not, but you knew what that picture was. So So your eyes are moving quickly over a scene. You're bringing that data in. Your brain is filtering out all the unnecessary stuff in there and giving you a perspective based upon what it thinks are the
Mm-hmm.
important parts of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
That's
it does. And in your example of reading, as an English teacher, it's one of the skills I teach my students is called chunking, where I try to get my students to read a whole phrase as if it's one word,
mm,
right?
mhm.
Instead of reading one word at a time. Your short-term memory can only hold on to 7 pieces of information
Yep.
at a given time. So when you have a sentence that's quite long, you have to look at it in less than 7 chunks and take it in that way. Um, and I think that's what our brain does as a rule when it comes to, say, looking at that landscape you just described, right? We put all of the big pieces together. We don't have to look at every leaf on every tree and add them all
Right.
together in order to see the tree that's on the mountainside,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
We see the big picture, and take it in and know that it's not just this big image. It's also the sum of its parts, and we can also imagine all of those parts within the whole, if that makes sense. And
Yeah,
I think
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
That's really what I was referring to there. Yeah, exactly right.
And Jake, I like
Oh
what
yeah.
you said because I also taught speed reading at one point in my life, and
Hmm.
you see the phrase as a chunk, and
Yeah.
you may pick out eyes pick out the key words, and your brain fills in the rest.
Yes.
Because it anticipates basically what the other words would be, like the and is, and all that's kind of punched out
They
there,
they
and you're really
they
picking out the
have to
key
be there.
words.
Yeah, they have to be there,
Yes.
and you don't have to spell every single, or you don't
No.
have to see every letter of every
Right.
word in order to understand the sentence. You take it all in.
Now, having said that, and going back to kind of the reading analogy, I always kind of, when I'm talking about things like this, we learn letters and we associate letters with sounds. Then we blend sounds together to make words, and then we blend words together in sentences to make something that's
Mhm.
intelligible. And then sentences become paragraphs, and paragraphs become essays. But that's all training.
Right.
But when you think about how things are represented symbolically, and a lot of times I teach, my students with symbols, I say, here's a symbol that's in the Civil War. What does it stand for? And they can rattle off 50 facts just about the symbol. So the symbol
Mhm.
itself is a higher way of communicating. So I
Absolutely.
think, in the education system, we might do a bit of a disjustice to our kids because we're teaching it from kind of the basic up instead of, a lot of times, even if my students can't read the material, they can still have a on grade level conversation with you about what the material means and have that kind of cognitive interaction with you and a very high
Yes.
level conversation.
Absolutely.
So, a lot of times I do switch over the symbols because maybe they're going to get lost in the kind of nuances of the words, but they
Right.
can still understand the concept and idea. And so when
Exactly.
you talk about, a lot of times speaking in symbols or speaking in metaphor or allegory, it is a higher way of speaking and
Mhm.
communicating. This is, I think, why the Egyptians use hieroglyphs. It's just a symbol can represent a whole concept
Mhm.
that
Right.
a word or a phrase can't.
Right.
And so if you taught the idea as a concept and associate it with a symbol and then string several symbols together that kind of give you a more grand meta concept, I think this is kind of a higher form of language that the brain and us, the ancients, understood. I
Yeah.
think the ancients understood that higher concept of symbolism
Mhm.
that we have somehow
Forgotten.
lost, and
Yeah.
we've taken it back to, okay, here's what an S sounds like, and
Mhm.
here's what a
Yeah.
T sounds like, instead of teaching that higher concept associated with a symbol. And
Yeah.
they had it right. I think so much of the education system is wrong about this. I think
Oh, yeah.
we can
Yeah.
teach our students at a higher level of cognition and consciousness, but we choose not to for whatever reason.
100%. 100%. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
As a teacher, you see that. I mean, and you can have that grade level conversation, and and they get it.
Mhm. They do.
So
They do.
and as a society, we talk in words and phrases, but a word only encapsulates what a thing is, and it really doesn't ask itself what is the transcendent form or transcendent meaning of the thing. The word captures a thing,
Yes.
but when capturing it, it kind of removes its mystery from the process.
True. And
You
you
know,
know, that's how we use language, is to name our world. You know, when you learn words as a child, it's, oh, what's that? What's that? What's that? And oh, that's a dog, that's a cat, that's a chair. You know, we're learning how to name our world.
Mhm.
Okay. And so therefore, you know, if you know a lot of words, or as the message that just appeared on the screen, when you learn a new language, you learn new ways of perceiving
right,
and understanding reality in the world around you. And so the
right,
more words you know, the bigger your world becomes. Okay. And so I think that all is interconnected in terms of our perceptions, how we see things. And John, it goes back to your question that you had asked earlier about, you know, training your mind. It's just the seven liberal arts and sciences were the
hmm,
ways that the secret societies and the ancients honed the mind so that
yes,
people could perceive more and more. And I think that's how you do it. Yeah.
And I think that part of what's happened over the years, you talk about the ancients and I think they were at a higher level of thinking that we are today. And
no,
what has happened
absolutely,
to us, and I think it's this right here. Our
mm,
technology has made us lazy. It's doing the thinking for us, and television is another one. It's doing the
mm,
thinking for us. We'll get lulled by watching, marathon watching a TV show where they didn't have that sensory input. They didn't have that. So their minds were thinking about other things all the time. Is that to say they didn't have things to occupy their minds? Yes, they did, of course. But I think the technology has dumbed us down, if I may use that.
100%.
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
100%. I say, I refer to that as outsourcing your thinking.
Yes.
Oh, what a
Yes.
great
That's
phrase! I love
perfect.
that phrase.
You
I
know,
love that.
I use it with my students all the time. I say, look, just because you have a smartphone doesn't mean you are. And what it's done is it's caused us to, and especially young people today, they don't value information. It doesn't take any work to acquire it. And, you
Right.
know, the only way that you really come to value something is when you really work for it, and then you achieve it. Whereas today, if you want to find something out, what do? We just pull out the phone, or you grab this laptop and you type it in and you find the answer.
Mhm.
There's no anticipation. There's no build up to finding out and discovering something. And so, you know, we're just, you know, a passive, what is it, consumer of factoids, and without really knowing anything at this point.
Yep. Yeah, it's an unfortunate side effect of our technology and our learning
Mhm.
as man gets better and better at creating, I mean, we're here I'm gonna jump down this rabbit hole just for briefly, just talking about AI. What's
Mm,
AI gonna do to us in the future when they start becoming I mean, look what's out there already, and it's gonna get more and more. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we haven't seen that's been developed as far as AI is concerned. And you see the movie like Robot, I mean, what will happen with that in the future? I mean, we are gonna get lazier and lazier because we're gonna create technology that's gonna take care of everything for us, and it's a sad thing. We have to make sure that we're still, free thinking people, and we don't, yeah.
but Jeff,
Yeah,
if we think
dumbstra
about
yeah, d I was just reading what Kate was saying there, but,
Yeah,
yeah, we can't
yeah,
allow that to happen, we can't, and,
yep,
and I think that's part of what I wanted to bring up today is simply delving into this a little bit to take a look at those different aspects, because if we allow that to happen, we're just killing ourselves, quite honestly. Um,
100%.
we we can't let that take over. We have to be always thinking about these things, and like I said, my brain is constantly working on different ideas like this, and that's why I wanted to talk about this tonight. Was because I think it's important, but I also think it's an area that warrants further investigation.
well,
So,
it depends if we become dependent on technology, or do we use technology to advance
right,
the learning process.
right,
Again, the measure I always use is, does it produce awe and wonder at some point? That's kind of your religious experience of like, oh my God, what is this?
hmm,
Or the whole rite of passage of learning, and
hmm,
then and earning that diploma or that certificate of like, okay, I've learned something, and now I go on to my next kind of step. I mean, we don't have those rites of passages or sense of discoveries anymore, and so people don't have that kind of that rapture of what
Mhm.
it is to have an insight.
Yeah.
I mean, an insight's a given thing. It's like Sherlock Holmes. You keep looking at the clues and clues and clues, and suddenly the light bulb come on, and you're like, oh my god, I can now understand the mystery. I now understand how it's solved. But it's looking at all the clues and wondering and investigating, and where does that insight come from? That's beyond our senses. When we have an insight or an idea, you can't hold an idea necessarily. You can hold its manifestation, but you can't hold an idea. Do ideas exist beyond our own minds and brains? Perhaps. How do you hold a thought? You don't. But yet thoughts are real.
Yep.
Really,
I don't know.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Jake.
Well, I was going to say, it kind of come full circle, because if we take this discussion we're having now of technology, and we think of virtual reality, now all of a sudden, the way that the VR plays on our senses, and how incredibly immersive it has already become, and it's only going to become more so.
Right.
Suddenly, that once again blurs the line between what is real and what is not. And is it because we are perceiving it with our senses? And remember, it's called virtual reality. Will those lines be blurred? It's a very scary idea in my mind.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it really is. I like that question. Do you think that the next evolution of man, the ability to use technology to further our species? I certainly hope so, Barbara. I really do. I hope that we don't allow it to, like I said before, make us lazy and make us, you can see things happening already, in our world. And I think a good section of the population would be fine just letting machines take over and do everything for us. And there's a good section of our population that don't want that to happen, and they would want to still do it themselves. It's the same concept when I better stay away from that one. I better not get out. I was going to bring up something. I'm going to stay away from it because it would open up a bad can of worms that I don't want to get into. But yeah, it's one of those things where we have to be very careful. Somebody said something about the calculator there. Yes, I'll catch myself doing that at work because I'm adding up pricing and stuff all the time. And something is simple. I'll reach over and grab the calculator and go, and I'm thinking, that was stupid. I know what that is already. Why did I need my calculator for that?
Yeah.
Again, I'm reaching for that technology when I didn't need to, and not use my brain for it. And that's when very good point about the calculator. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I do the same thing.
Absolutely.
Yep. So I think we were gonna, take a phone call or two. I think we were speaking with John, and I were speaking with somebody earlier that I said I think wants to call in and kind of share some experiences with us about brain functionality that might be very interesting in this topic because, again, I like the idea of training your brain because we are so have a tendency to like I said earlier, let our brains do or let our machines and let our technology do the work for us. I think it is important to maybe train our brain a little bit and be able to see outside of the box that our brains are creating for us. And I think that's what it is. I think we're getting inside of a box, especially when you go through the same routine every single day. You get up in the morning, you do this, you do this, you do this. So how many of us have a routine? When you get up in the morning, do you start that same routine, and do you do that pretty much every single day? Then you go to work, you do your routine at work, and then you move on from there. So we need to break out of that. We do have a call. Let me grab this here.
Right.
Whoops. And hello, who we got on the line?
Hi, Jeff. It's Amy.
Hi, Amy. How you doing?
I'm doing all right.
So tell us a little bit about what you wanted to discuss here tonight.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the fact that this is all medically proven science.
Okay.
And I was going to try to go down the path of how I discovered this, because a lot of this is new for me.
Okay.
And it kind of takes me through my medical history through time.
All right.
So we'll start with the fact that I was born with super bad eyesight. Like, my astigmatism was ridiculously bad.
Oh.
there is a measurement for how bad astigmatism is through, they have that designated. Everything above a 4 is considered a severe astigmatism. And whether or not your lens, which is meant to be disc-shaped, is egg-shaped or cat-eyed will depend on if it's a positive or a negative number for your astigmatism. And when I got my cataract surgery in 2020, they discovered, as they had seen, because your astigmatism can get worse with certain medical conditions and after a certain age that I haven't reached yet, that my astigmatism when one eye was a negative 10.75, a negative 11 in the other eye.
Wow. Now, I don't know. I don't understand those, but I'm taking that as being pretty severe, right?
Really, yeah, pretty blind. They could not give me the trifocal lens because they simply don't have the technology to make it. I have to wear readers now.
Wow.
So, and an earlier point in history, for my medical history here, it was, I was having problems with my ears. So I went to an ENT and he heard about, I used to get lots of ear infections as a kid. So he gave me a hearing test. And what he found in the hearing test is not only did I not have any hearing loss, I had enhanced hearing. I hear things at higher vibrational frequencies than the human ear is supposed to hear.
Wow.
Now, I ended up not being happy with that doctor, and I went to another one because he wasn't solving the problem I was there for. And the other doctor ran an ear pressure test, which he found that was abnormal, and it made him scope my ear. And in the scoping of the ear, he found I had a very tight Fibonacci swirl in the ear, and that the bulb of my ear was larger than is normal.
Wow.
So my hearing is enhanced because my eyesight is bad. And that's just biology. It's pretty normal. People will do that.
Well, hey, Amy, can I ask what a Fibonacci scroll sequence is in the ear?
And well, your ear in and of itself, your ear canal is the swirl. It's the Fibonacci sequence.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's identical to the snail swirl.
Yes.
You find in DNA, you find the Fibonacci sequence repeating itself all over the place.
Yes.
It's in everything. So all mathematically calculable. So there's the enhanced hearing, but because of the bad eyesight. Now, when I got the cataract surgery, and I have to say, I could hear weird things. My work has actually made use of this where it's a useful thing for us to have. So I could always hear things that you're not really supposed to be able to hear, only I couldn't explain it before. But I'll get into how enhanced what that actually means after. We went in, they did the cataract surgery, and I come out of that, and now I'm seeing visual distortion. And I'm just like, what is going on? Because you just fixed, did you mess something up? So, I did what you do. You go back to your doctors. They did a 3D map of my eyeball. Structurally, everything is happening the way it's supposed to. My mental acuity is sound. I don't need any therapeutics. It's not like I'm schizophrenic. There's none of that. Mm-hmm. They can't explain any of those things. And then they did an MRI. And in the MRI, what they found is that I had neural pathways that connected my sound, my sense of hearing, and my sense of sight.
Wow.
There's a form of this that they went through. It's medical diagnosis that comes in many flavors. It's called synesthesia. And the most common form is synesthesia. And they do find this in like math, geniuses that have won Nobel Peace Prize things. It's not the form of synesthesia I have, where they see letters and numbers in different colors.
I've heard of that.
So it's something that's, it's widely, it's accepted by the medical community that this is a thing. But one of the variations of that is that I see sound. And that's not even uncommon because people who are born blind develop an echolocation system.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
They didn't realize when I was a kid with this really bad eyesight that I needed glasses till I was 9 years old.
Oh, wow.
Because I was not running around and bumping into everything.
Mm-hmm.
I had no more clumsiness than, any other average kid. And it was just that I didn't notice it because the eyesight was so bad.
Right.
Until the eyesight was clear. So when I'm looking at an object, I don't just see the object. First, there's some kind of light wash that goes over it, like like when you have a ceiling fan turned on when it has a light fixture.
Mm-hmm.
Only I see that even if there is no ceiling fan running or anything. Because I've tried this. I've tried going and turning different things on, seeing what I see, seeing what I don't see. You know, my own little kind of science experiments, because I want to medically explain this, not just immediately go to paranormal. I believe in the paranormal, but you don't go there first.
Right. Good.
Right. You go to science first,
Yep.
and then if you can't explain it, then we
Right.
start talking about other things.
Yes.
Right. So there's the light wash over every object, and then there's this thing called visual snow. And again, both of these things are common in people with synesthesia. It's just this particular form of synesthesia, it's like 2% of the world population even has this. Visual snow is actually something everybody sees. When you're going to one room and it's a darker lit room than the room you were in, and you have that, you know, that static that you're seeing along the edges until your eyesight adjusts.
Mm-hmm.
I see that static all the time.
Wow.
It's on every object, every person, doesn't matter. It's everywhere. It's less noticeable when I'm looking at a screen because the backlight of the screen kind of distracts from the visual distortion.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, would
there is
that be somewhat of a like an aura? I mean, do you see this on living like an aura over? You know, I've noticed that it was more prevalent when I was younger than it is now. But I would look at like trees or whatever, and I could see like what looked like almost like a flame or whatever you want to call it, a clear, but it was like this around the tree. I could actually, and I used to think, well, that to me that was an aura of that living thing. Is it something like that, or is it not that at all?
It depends on how you want to define aura. Like, I don't see necessarily a color to it. Most people who describe seeing auras, I would not say that I see auras. I wish I saw auras.
Yeah,
but
I didn't see them
that.
in color. It was clear.
You know, it was clear? Okay. All right. So, I mean, it is along the edge of every surface, and it is not necessarily right on the surface. It's like right very close, like fractions of an inch
like
away.
Maybe the energy of that particular thing of the molecules made up. Yeah.
And then it goes into your, you know, the definitions here of, you know, quantum mechanics and quantum physics that you're talking about, where you're not exactly touching.
Right.
It's around the edge, and everybody's human brain, going back to a point that John asked about, is capable of doing this exact thing. It's not that you can't. Every one of you can, and to test that, if you take your hand and you put it real close to your face and you close your eyes and you start talking, you'll be able to feel your breath on your hand. And then you have a general idea of where your hand is in relation to your face. And if you were to concentrate on that with various objects and keep doing it, you would hear the difference in the sound. You would hear the audio distortion based upon how far away it is. The human brain is just capable of perceiving objects around us without. And it's really just a matter of focusing on those portions, choosing to enhance those senses.
Yep.
You just have to focus and train. I mean, it's the order of the bard. From the Druidic orders, this was part of their teachings, because they were doing everything they could to enhance the memory. Right. That was really the purpose, because they're supposed to be the ones, you know, telling all the stories. Right. And you didn't write that down. Your responsibility was to learn it and memorize it. Now, my family comes from a lot of generations of those things. And then when you're talking about memory in and of itself, because you have some of that could be inherited down, if you will. Because if you think about I'm not so sure I'm big on inherited skills, but in theory, when you're looking at only the people with this enhanced skill set are the ones who get to, you know, procreate and leave children and so on and so forth down. Eventually those kids would be naturally better at doing that thing. They would still have to learn the skill. They would just be better at it because their family it's been in the family for a really long time.
Right. Somebody asked
a theory.
Yeah. Somebody asked a question of you. Can you see temperature in color?
Temperature. Now, I can't say that I've ever seen temperature. I mean, this is not something I've ever attempted.
Yeah. I hadn't even thought about something like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the frequency of what hurts. Like, I'm not sure exactly what it is I'm hearing, but I've had theories, but the thing is, the medical community is not really interested in solving this. My primary care doctor got to a place where he's like, "Oh, that medically explains it," and then they move on. Now, I don't want to get rid of it, because why would I want to get rid of that?
Right. For sure.
It's an extra sense.
Yeah.
At work, I'm on this thing that's called the commissioning team. We go out to, I'm in the mechanical engineering department, so mechanical rooms, and you go visually inspect everything, tell people how they can enhance their systems, how they can make it better, what they need to fix. And when I'm down in a mechanical room, if a belt is slipping on a pump, I can hear that before they can hear that.
Wow.
They'll eventually be able to hear it as the belt slips enough. It'll get really loud, and you'd be able to hear it, but I can hear it before then.
Wow. Well, it's
I knew when a halogen lamp was going out on the outside of our building.
Yep. Well, it's a superpower. Who would want to get rid of a superpower? Come on. Seriously. I mean,
I tell you.
Well, it's like
concerts are fun. Concerts are fun, dude. You get a big speaker, small room. There's a laser light show coming out. Like,
my
different
goodness.
notes have different colors. It's a lot of fun.
That would be wicked.
Why would I want to get rid of that?
Yeah, exactly. That would be wild. See, I have the thing called tinnitus, and I have a constant ringing in my ears constantly. I mean, it's always there. Sometimes it's louder than others, and sometimes my brain, like it does with many other things that we just talked about tonight, it filters it out. It cancels it out because I'm busy doing something else. When I really notice it, when everything is very quiet, when it's very quiet in the room, that's when I really notice it. But I've lived with this for so many years. I don't, people, they still have trouble trying to figure out exactly what tinnitus is. They say, oh, the hairs are vibrating in there or whatever, and it's causing it. I want to believe that it's more than that. Now, whether I'm right or wrong, I'm not a doctor in this. I have no idea, but I want to think that it's that string theory vibration. I'm hearing something that most people or some people can't hear. That's what I believe it is.
That it's more sensitive, and there's nothing saying that the sound that you don't know where that sound is coming from.
Exactly.
Medical science can't explain that, and there's a lot of people that have that. So maybe there's something structurally about your ear that's strange, or maybe it's just the way your brain is interpreting the sound. Because most of everything with our senses is just the perception of our brain. I mean, color is a complete illusion. It's just a matter of how, whether or not this light is reflecting off of that object.
Yes.
Exactly. Right.
I mean, so most of it is illusion. In fact, I learned a whole lot about how the eyeball functions in this process because I was really trying to medically explain this. So I'm very aware of how vision works now. And blue eyes are an illusion. Your eyes look blue to you in this moment, in this light, in this shade, when you are looking at yourself in the mirror right now. If you were to go outside where there's more light, your eyes will be a different shade of blue. And if you're wearing a blue colored shirt, it comes into a different shade. Your eyes look that color because of the structure of your eyeball when it is blue.
Yep.
And they said because blue-eyed people or green-eyed people have a physical different structure to their eyes than brown-eyed people.
Interesting.
Wow.
Which are different than green, true green versus hazel versus amber. So it's not the same. There's a whole bunch of different ways that the eye gets its color.
Well, I love what you've said, Amy, because it's really kind of echoing the sentiment that, reality depends on its context. Like when you're saying that, the eyes change depending on the context, well, it does. So, what is something without context? And, it's just getting me to think about that question. I'm not asking for an answer, but it's, what is reality without context, without relationships to other things? And so
reality is nothing without context to other things. But I didn't know. I didn't tell my parents, that I couldn't see things because for all I knew, this is how people saw.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
Wow.
That's very interesting. So, like you said, why would you want to get rid of something like that? That's fascinating to me. Like you said, going to a concert and you're seeing the sound and colors and stuff like that. That's, I see for my brain has trouble even figuring out how something like that is even possible. But I would love for, to be able to see that, that to me is like, I don't know. That's just really cool. I can't, people are going to say, some people would listen to you and go, oh, that's a bunch of horse manure. How could that be possible? Oh, she's crazy or whatever. You know what? I can't say that it is. I can't say that that's because this is real to you. You are seeing this. You are experiencing this. This is real to you. And for me to sit here and say that, for me to say that it's not, then that would be ludicrous.
Right.
I mean, those people can have all the arguments they want. My first answer was to go to the medical science community. I mean, I was really worried that something was actually wrong.
Yep.
Like, what if when they're in the process of the cataract surgery, they cut something
right
that they weren't supposed to cut? Like, I had to go there first.
Of course.
So in the medical community, the accepted medical science community, not fringe anything, just your regular primary care doctor, is who has come through. I mean, and the neurologist, because he did send me to a neurologist to get the MRI, and been like, nope, this is what it is. So, I mean, this is not something that, like, if they can argue if they want to, but those people are usually the ones that go back to the medical science community in the first place. And if it's outside the mainstream science.
Right.
This is mainstream science. It's just mainstream science that people don't much hear about.
Yep. I agree.
So the question is Amy seeing what reality really is, and we're not because our senses just aren't as attuned as hers?
Could be.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that makes perfect sense. And I think she is. I think she's seeing something that, you know, we don't see because she has this kind of extra sense that she has, which is a real gift that we just don't see it because we weren't equipped with it, you know, at birth.
Makes
sense.
Was.
For whatever reason, you know, I mean, that's just an amazing that you have that kind of extra sense of reality. And, you know, you may very well be seeing the reality that we can't see.
Right. Or at least more of it.
Or at least more of it.
Well, more of it, I would say so. I would say that we're all in the same reality in and of itself. And it's just our perception of that reality changes.
Correct.
And it's supposed to depend on how much you want to go into that perception makes reality concept. But there has to be some kind of agreed upon norm within a society, or you'll just have chaos.
Right. Absolutely.
That's your objective measure.
Yeah. And that's what your brain is trying to do. It's trying to keep that chaos limited.
But you can look at the other,
it's in our natural inclinations as human to categorize things that are around us.
Yes.
That's what science is.
Yes.
But you could look at the other end of the spectrum, you know, a person that's colorblind. They still are seeing reality, but they don't see colors at all.
Right.
You know, and how is what Amy sees, what we see, and what a person that's colorblind see, how is that different? It's the same reality. It all goes down to how it's perceived. So reality and that, the perception is the relative reality, but the reality that exists beyond perception is what reality is.
Agreed.
That's interesting.
You just never know how things overlap. Like, and because you don't know what neurologically is going around in people's brains. You would have to have a scan of every single person.
Well, yeah,
and then you'd have to have a whole battery of tests, right? And that just doesn't happen. People don't. There's no reason to go through all that medical process.
Yeah, and as I said earlier, you know, when we first started the show, is that I think we're just in our infancy when it comes to understanding how the brain works. Truly.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's, you know, will we get there at some point? Yeah, it's possible. And would we, you know, and then you take that a step further and you say, well, do we get to the point where, you know, our brain, we know so much, or we start to learn so much and we could do so much. Do we even need the physical body anymore at some point? So, you know, I mean, it could go really down, you know, we could really take that a long way. But again, the understanding of our brain is so limited. So limited.
Now, I know I have a friend who's a medicine woman for Navajo tribe, and she would tell you to be careful with that last statement, because in her opinion, when you get to that place where you've advanced your senses enough, you've ascended high enough in the ascended master theory, you then die because you no longer have a need for your physical body.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah, it leaves because it's not necessary.
Right.
You're here in this body just to have a certain experience, to make your impact on the world on an energetic level the way you're supposed to, like whatever your destiny is, if you would. She has a very firm belief in destiny, but destiny and free will are in conflict with each other. So you have to
That's a whole nother subject right there. That is truly, it truly is, because, you know, I don't want to, I think as human beings, we don't want to but we don't want to think that our destiny, that our life is predestined and we can't change it. We don't want to think that. We want to think we have free will to do whatever we want. But then there's others that believe, no, you are destined. You're going to do this whether you like it or not. And I don't want to inside that box. You know what I mean? So I mean, where's the truth in that? That gets really deep there.
Well, I think that we as moderns.
What's that, Jake?
I think that we as moderns have now have a kind of a misunderstanding of what destiny or fate actually mean to the ancients. That they were able to identify fate after the fact. You know, when all of a sudden, you know, all of your choices led you to where you ended up, you realized, oh, this was fated to happen. It was something that was seen, like I said, in retrospect, in terms of hindsight, as opposed to knowing that something was completely preordained and it was unavoidable, which is how we tend to view the idea of fate or destiny. I think. I mean,
that is true.
It's the
that is true. Fated or destined in some cultures for specific things, and have the rest of your life just be your person going through life.
Sure. But the idea is that, you know, it's the root word of destination. You know, it's just wherever you ended up, you know, as opposed to, are you getting on a train and you're not able to turn off the tracks one way or the other, and you can only get off when you arrive at your destination? Or is it a matter of where all of a sudden, wherever you end up, you say, oh, this was where I was supposed to be. So just a different way of looking at it, I think. Yeah. So such an interesting.
We're really talking about our perception of reality around us, because it comes back to that. Fate is a matter of perception, you know, so is destiny, but then so is free will.
There it is.
How much free will do we even really have? Because a lot of our everyday life is controlled by whatever governmental system we're in, whatever job we have. People around us are telling us what is expected of us.
Yep. And you know that thing that we just spring forward on this morning, you know, that clock? I hate that thing. I hate it. The idea of a clock. I hate it because it controls our lives in so many ways. And I absolutely hate the clock. You know,
I don't see a purpose in the spring forward, fall behind thing.
Well, no, I don't either.
That's the time that they created it. We don't need it anymore.
Yeah, then we don't need it.
I live in a state where we don't do that.
Yeah.
There is no moving of the clock.
Yeah, that'd be great. But I tell you, just the whole idea.
I still have to keep track.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody else's time changes. And if I'm interacting with anybody outside of the state, I still have to keep track.
Right.
It's annoying.
Yeah. But I just hate the whole idea of behind a clock. I don't want to know what time it is. I will take care of things as they come, and I'll get to where I'm going as they come. I have an internal clock. My body knows, you know, and I think all do. We just don't listen to it quite often. There you go. Here's another thing that, you know, could be a deep subject, but we all have an internal clock. I mean, I wake up every day at the same time. I haven't set my alarm in 30 years because I wake up every day at the same time.
Likely, Jeff, you've been waking up at that exact same time since you were born.
Probably.
Because that is another thing that we've gone through with my family. Because some of us are early morning people, which is not me. Others are late nighters, which is what I am.
I am too.
But whatever it is that's going on, I'm going to wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
And I was like that.
5:30.
Right when they brought me home from the hospital.
Yep.
My mom said that I slept straight through the night, the very first night they brought me home from the hospital.
Yeah, you don't see that often, that's for sure. But again, that's that thing about an internal clock. We have one. Everybody has. I know pretty much what time it is without thinking about it, and I'll look at the clock to confirm it. And I'm always right. But it's just that part of that what's going on inside your brain that you may not think about. So we created a clock because man wanted to know what time it was, and I just personally, I hate it. I hate clocks.
Wow. The business world.
And I'm looking at it now to see we've been on for an hour and a half now. So
the business world made clocks.
Yes, I know. You're right.
To define and divide up so they can try to force us to be productive.
Yes, I know. Yeah. Yeah. For 8 hours a day, whether we like it or not.
Right.
Well, except for when you're a teacher, then it could be much more than 8 hours a day or kind of much less. I don't know.
Much
more. More.
Very, very much more.
In the engineering world, your day is not 8 hours at all.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yep.
Yeah.
I said, oh yeah, Indy Zantic said I set an alarm for this podcast. Well, appreciate that. Thank you, Indy. That's pretty cool. So that's really interesting. Is that pretty much what you had to share with us for this time anyway, Amy? I know we're going to have you on again when we talk about some other subjects, but
we could, because I'm thinking that some of that synesthesia does start coming into play when we start getting into the paranormal conversation, but that's not the focus of this particular podcast.
Right.
So just this is kind of an important one for you to have first, because for me to talk about, because my perception is not the perception of everyone else. My brain is not within the quote unquote norm.
Right. That's interesting.
Of how the brain is supposed to work.
Yeah.
And it never has been. And these things cross over into other places. So the Order of the Bard has really good memory, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, your memory, as you guys were stating before, is usually sensory memories are your strongest memories.
Yep.
Sensory memories are constructed from one or more senses overlapping with heightened emotions.
Like burning yourself.
That's usually where they come in. Yeah, like burning yourself, or something very pleasurable. Maybe, the sound of children laughing outside and the smell of fresh baked cookies. I mean, it doesn't have to be bad.
Right.
It can be good. But I also, amongst the many of the other things I have, is generalized anxiety disorder. So every memory for me when I wake up is a sensory memory, because the synesthesia crosses the two senses over, and then the anxiety makes the emotions heightened. So I tend to remember things. Now, I tend to remember things easier that I hear than I necessarily read. It's not perfect. It's definitely not a photographic memory. But I usually get the gist of the information correct, and I might need to look up some specific portion of something. But it is directly responsible, those things with the sensory memory, to that whole, which comes into the other podcast, that Encyclopedia Amy thing. That's where that comes in.
Yep.
Because the memory is enhanced. And all it means is I've looked this stuff up already. I've thought of something that you guys are thinking of, and I went and researched it already.
Cool. That's really interesting. I tell you, that's and again, we could go on and on. And I know that you've been with doctors and you've had some study done, and your own research into this is really cool too, because that shows you where you're at more so, I think, than going to see a bunch of medical doctors. You're researching yourself, which I think is really cool. That's an interesting thing.
I would recommend everybody do that. Yeah. There is actually, if you're looking to enhance your memory and looking to enhance, there's a test that you can take that will break down how you learn. So it'll tell you which one of those senses that you should really be focusing on when you're trying to learn something, especially if it's a difficult concept, because some people are visual, some people are auditory. So there's a study, there's a test you can take that teaches you how your brain in particular works.
Well, link that for us when you get a chance. Link that for us in the chat of this show, and that'd be great for people if they want to explore that a little deeper. But we're gonna get wrapping up here. I know John is a little bit under the weather and he's struggling here a little bit.
It's all good.
Yeah. So I don't want to. I want to
keep you guys later.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amy, for calling in. That was an awesome phone call. Thank you for sharing some really cool stuff with us. All right, have a good night.
You too. Bye.
Bye. That's really interesting, and that shows you what we were talking about before, that there are different people. You see people that have ESP or different capabilities that are away from the norm. And obviously Amy is one of those people that has some things going on with her brain that allows her to do things that are outside of that norm, which I think is fascinating, quite honestly.
Cool. It's really cool.
It is. It's ESP, extrasensory perception. It is a perception that is extrasensory. It's beyond the normal senses.
Right. I would love to have something like that. I really would. That would be neat. And you know what? And like she was saying, I think that most of us are capable of those things if we train our brains for that. And we have to filter out, all the stuff around us in our daily world and really work on something like that. I think it's very possible. I'm a person who believes that if you convince yourself of something, it can happen. Yeah. It's kind of a funny, I'll just bring this up and then we get wrapping up here, but it's a movie called Somewhere in Time with Christopher Reeves and Jane Seymour. He convinced himself that he was back in time. And that's where that goes. You're convincing your brain that you are back in time, that you are in a particular time. And when he woke up, he was there. He was back in time. So,
Wow.
that's that whole thing about if you believe something strongly enough without doubt, you can make it happen. It will be the way you believe. And I think that's possible. But again, how do you get to that point? That's another.
Well, Jeff, it's the power of Eckhart Tolle calls it the power of intentionality, and
Mhm.
is if you will something in the being by just thinking about it, and part of the ascended master kind of concept or idea is you have the power to will reality into existence.
Mhm.
Kind of that whole
Talks about
creativity.
that in the Bible, does it not?
It talks about that in the Bible.
Yep.
So it's an interesting concept. Can we will things into existence?
Mhm.
That sounds like another beyond our world. And the other one I really liked, and I think Jake and then Amy touched on it, is does free will exist? I think that would be a fantastic topic for a future beyond our world, because does it exist?
I
And
don't
what
know.
is free will beyond our senses? I mean, what is this? We've talked about that there are things that exist outside of our senses, but we've really not nailed down what those really are. In
Right.
Amy's case, she's seeing things that we don't see, and
Mhm.
so that's a reality that exists.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Right.
And seeing things in a different way, like seeing sound as colors and whatnot. It's
Wow,
that's truly amazing. It really is.
It really
And it
is.
just
amazing.
shows that
It's just
we
so
are
interesting.
so limited. We are so limited, and our brains are not allowing us to. And again, there was another statement that the cognitive scientist Dr. Hoffman had said, and he said this, and this is a quote: "Seeing the truth gets in the way of keeping you alive."
Wow.
Interesting.
Now take that for think on that. Just kind of think about that statement a little bit. Yeah, seeing the truth keeps you from being alive. So it gets in the way of keeping you alive. So because your brain is working on keeping you alive, and it's just
Right.
filtering out all this other stuff, and I don't want it to filter out all that, or do I? I don't know. I'd like to be able. Like I talked about being able to see auras. I used to see those. Now I don't see them so much. But again, it's because I've allowed myself to get distracted by everything else. Just like modern man has. I think so. So what do you think?
I want to say yes, Tom. Yes to Tom. The answer is yes.
Really?
He did write that in Hamlet. Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
there are more things in heaven and earth. Horatio.
Horatio that dreamt of near
This is
philosophy.
your philosophy.
Wow. Nice.
They wrote that as Shakespeare.
Yep. Tom's another one that comes up with some pretty interesting things to talk about sometimes. He's
Always
got
does.
yes, he does.
Always has great comments and questions.
Mhm. Yep. That's why I forced him to come on the show. So when I find somebody like that, I got to drag him onto the show, like you two guys. Well, I tell you what, this has been fascinating, and I'll let you wrap up if you have anything else you want to comment on or bring up real quick. We've had some fascinating comments, and I know we've missed so many of them that have gone by. In the chat here, there was just some wonderful comments talking about memory. We could go on and on and on with it. This is one of those subjects where we could just talk forever. There was a question that I think it was Kat Fulton had asked over here. It was talking about when he said, Jeff, do you hear the sound you hear? Does it change? Mine changes pitch, loudness, and note. Very weird. It does a little, Kat, not much though. It does change a little bit sometimes. It actually, so if I can describe this, it almost seems like sometimes it's vibrating faster, but yet not really changing the note or the pitch.
Hmm.
That makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's almost like it vibrate. It's like a vibration to me. Yeah. Have you ever heard cicada bugs?
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know if you live in an area where there's cicada bugs. That's the sound I hear of like a cicada bug. It's that high pitched, buzzing noise. That's what I hear. And I don't know, but I think it's string theory that I'm hearing. So I don't know.
It could be. I mean, I
That's what I'm gonna say.
hear it. I hear it too, and sometimes it's louder than other times, but
Yep.
it doesn't change in pitch or anything like that.
Yeah.
Stays the same.
No, mine doesn't change. Pretty much stays the same. Any final thoughts on tonight's subject?
Go, John.
No, I was going to say we're going to have to tackle this free will exists. So we have our topic, For sure. And I think it's what's real, destiny, free will? Are they both real? Or they, I just think it's going to be a fascinating future topic.
Yeah, for sure.
I think so too. I think so too.
Set that up.
I just want to say, Jeff, thanks for including me tonight. This was a lot of fun. I knew it would be, but I mean, it's always fun when I sit and talk with you two. But that was just really interesting. And of course, Amy's phone call was really, really interesting as well. So this was a lot of fun. So thanks for including me. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. I just I love surrounding myself with smart people because I'm not a very smart person. So I surround myself with smart people, and I can pull from pull from them. But I do get off on a subject. I get these ideas in my head, and it's like, well, I just want to talk about this. So you bring in people, and you brought up the out of body experience for last time, and that was just
that was fun.
It was fun, and that show is getting pretty good reviews, by the way, out there, and getting a lot of views. But it was a fun subject, and it again, it can go on and on. It really is cool. So, did we have somebody else that wanted to call in? Oh boy,
possibly.
You got a few minutes yet, or you want to take this? Or no, I don't know.
Yeah. If the person that direct messaged me would like to call in, we got a couple minutes.
Yeah, we'll give you a couple minutes. Sorry, I shouldn't have started wrapping it up already. We'll see if the phone rings here. But yeah, this is just one of those subjects. And I truly believe that there are things that exist outside of what we can see. I don't know why I believe that. I just, maybe it's just wishful thinking that I want to grasp onto that. But I honestly believe that because we are so limited in what we can see and hear and everything, I honestly believe that there's things happening around us that we are just not perceiving for whatever reason. And I still think we get that crossover from time to time. Okay.
Sounds like we can have a call in.
Yeah, we got a call. All right, let's take this. Yeah.
Call it.
Hello. Who do we got online?
Okay. Paula.
Hi, Paula. Hey, you're going to have to turn down your laptop or whatever you're watching the show on.
Okay. I can do that.
Yeah, you'll have to turn that down or else we'll hear it in the background.
Okay, I got it.
Okay, so what's going on today?
Well, this happened to me years ago in my 20s, which was years ago. I was working out in Disneyland. Best job I ever had. I loved it. It was just fantastic. But all of a sudden, one morning I woke up and something told me to sell everything and move back to Michigan. So I started selling everything. Just it was surreal for me, and it was kind of like robotic. So I moved back. I flew back, sold my car and everything. Flew back, stayed with my sister for 2 weeks, and then I moved to Tennessee. And she was supposed to come down and visit, but I had those 2 weeks with her, and then a few weeks later, she was killed in an accident.
Oh wow!
Oh.
So it's like, was that God telling me to do that, or was it something else, or was it a combination, or was it my intuition? I don't know. It was just so. It just, but I'm thankful I had those 2 weeks with her.
Yes, absolutely.
But if I hadn't have done that, I've never seen her again.
Right.
I mean, I see her again in heaven, of course, but on this planet, I didn't. So. That was cool.
I had a very similar experience. If I could share with you, my father. I don't know why it ended up having me go back to Michigan, but I had circumstances happened in my life that I ended up going back to Michigan. And right shortly after I got there, we found out that my father had terminal lung cancer, and I got to spend a year with him before he passed, and I would not have if that hadn't happened. And then I was able to, assist my mother after that and, keep her going after that tragic loss. So, yeah, I know what you mean. And what is that? And that kind of goes with what we were talking about earlier about destiny. I mean, was that what,
exactly?
Was that what we were supposed to? It was was premonition. That was a premonition, Jan says. So, I mean, yeah, that's interesting. You would not have had that opportunity to get those 2 weeks with her. Wow.
And, I mean, at the time, I just thought it was God telling me to do it. So, I thanked him, and I still thank him for those 2 weeks that I had with her.
Yep. But wow.
It's just, and I guess that was the first time I realized, and things may have happened before then, but I just wasn't aware that I sensed things, intuitively.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
just now I'm more aware of those things.
Right. And that's important that you try to do that too. Try to be more sensitive or more aware of those things happening, because I think that stuff like that happens in our lives all the time, and we just miss it because we're distracted, or we didn't pay attention, or you brush it off for whatever reason that you
flipping off like
right.
nothing.
Right. Or you get that notion that you should contact somebody. Have you ever had that?
Oh yeah.
And you reach out and they needed to hear from you, or they had something that they, isn't that odd? But yet it's that
extreme.
It's that connection.
Or if you're driving down the road or something and you think of somebody that you haven't thought of in a while, and then all of a sudden they call you out of the blue.
I know. That is awesome. Yeah, that's happened. I've had that happen. That is pretty awesome. Yeah, exactly.
So,
wow.
I just wanted to share.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks,
bye-bye.
Paula.
Take care.
All
Bye,
right.
guys.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Wow.
And again, that goes back to that whole destiny thing,
Yeah.
Was that supposed to happen? That she would get that 2 weeks with her sister? That's yeah.
It's amazing.
And again, I think about that with my father,
Yeah.
I had no notion of going back to Michigan. And all of a sudden there I am, and we find out my dad has lung cancer, and I got a year to spend with him before he passed away. So I mean,
Wow.
that's I needed to be there.
Right.
And destiny, if you want to say that, took me there. So
But some intelligence contacted you, something out there contacted you, or had you have that insight, and therefore whatever contacted you knew about what was going to happen, even though you're in time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something we haven't even tackled, and it's a very interesting concept. With predestination and free will.
yeah, that's what Kate just said. We all have a precognition. If we listen to our inner thoughts.
Yep.
Wow.
Gets deep, doesn't it?
Whew.
We'll save that for next time.
Yes,
All right, we're
yes.
going to wrap it up now. We're going to wrap
Wow.
it up. But thank you, folks, for being here with us tonight. Jake and John. Wow, thank you guys so much. I knew it was going to be a fun topic to discuss, and certainly was. And again, we could go on and on, but we're gonna have to tackle that one, John. I think that predestined is a destiny. Or do we have free will to actually do what we want? Yeah, we're gonna have to tackle that one. Yes, somebody said we got to talk about ESP. I'm not an expert on that. Well, I'm not an expert on any of these things. They're just crazy thoughts that I have, and I want to talk about it with people. So
Fun to talk about.
Yes, they
absolutely.
are.
Absolutely.
All right, thanks again, guys. Hey, if you're out there on the YouTube side, click on that subscribe button for us and let us know. Give us a thumbs up if you like the content of our show, because it really does help with YouTube and stuff to get it out there. So give us a thumbs up if you like it. And if you click on that notification bell, you'll know as soon as we get up there, and as soon as we go live with new content, or if I upload something, you'll know right away. And if you'd like to help support the show, we have a Patreon channel, and it's patreon.com, and my page there is jfree906. Thanks again, folks, for being here. Thanks, my co-host, for coming on and sharing this with me. You guys have a great rest of your week. We'll see you here Wednesday night for the Curse of Oak Island and Beyond, episode number 18 recap at 7:30 Wednesday. We'll see you here. All right, bye-bye now.